do you tell someone that they're wrong? I think that's a very important question in the world today because no matter who you are, you believe very strongly that someone else is wrong. And sometimes this goes into how we treat our family members or our church family because we know that we're right and they're wrong. And there's a lot of different ways to let someone know that they're wrong and try to bring them to what we believe is the right thing. Well, to kind of explain this, I want to tell you an old legend of a story from the conquistadors. There's a story where the Spanish conquistadors were retreating from the Aztecs and they were going, trying to sneak out of the city during the night. And they were loaded down with all of their armor and they had treasure. I mean, they had bags full of jewels and gold and they were trying to escape the city because the Aztecs, who had first treated them like gods, realized that these were just greedy, selfish men, and they're actually trying to kill them. Well, in the middle of the night, there was a terrible storm, and somehow an old lady heard the Spanish trying to leave, and she sounded the alarm. And so the Spanish are on these long causeways, almost like earthen ramps leading from the city through the lake to the firm ground on the other side. And they're weighed down with all this stuff. And in the lightning, in the flashes of lightning, they see hundreds of canoes just start to come from every direction and start to attack them as they're running on these earthen ramps. Well, one of the conquistadors slips and falls, and he kind of rolls into the water, and he's weighed down by his treasure and his armor, and he can't quite get up, and where he fell, the water's not super deep, so it's not like he just disappeared into the water, but he's definitely struggling for his life. He's in trouble. And one of his companions stops and starts pointing to him and yelling at him that he's in the water. You're in the water. Get out of the water. You're going to drown. Get out of the water. And the man doesn't even really pay attention to his friend screaming at him because he's just trying to survive. He's gulping for air and fighting and he's just being pulled down. Well, another friend stops and he sees his companion in the water drowning. And instead of yelling at him, he drops his bag of treasure, and he drops it and it gets trampled on and someone kicks it and it rolls off into the water and his treasure is gone. But he doesn't even notice because he's unsnapping his big breastplate and he's pulling it off, and he throws his helmet to the side and he struggles and falls down into the muck and the mud and the water, and he grabs his friend and he pulls him up. And as he's pulling his friend up, his feet are sinking deeper and deeper into the mud, and his friend is thrashing around and it hits him in the face and it makes his nose start to bleed and it hurts and it's in pain, but he doesn't care because he is trying to save his friend. And he knocks off his friend's helmet and he grabs the bag of treasure and pushes it away and flings it into the water and pulls this man up onto the firm ground. And they are both panting and they cannot believe that they didn't drown in the water. You see, Jesus says we're supposed to love one another like he loved us. And when Jesus was up in heaven, before he came down to earth as a little baby, before he died on the cross, he saw humanity. And in his God perspective of seeing the beginning and the end and everything, he saw you and me. And he saw that we were weighed down by our sins and our addictions and the lies that we believed. And he saw that we were drowning in the water. And instead of yelling at us from heaven, saying, "Hey, Grant, you're full of sin. You're drowning," instead of mocking us for being stupid and not letting go of our treasure, instead of putting us down because we're not on the straight, narrow path, but we've fallen into the dark, muddy waters, Jesus took off his God armor. He threw aside the treasures that come with being the King of Kings. And he got off of the firm, solid ground and he got into the nasty mud, and he pulled us up himself. You see, as Christians, we know that Jesus died for us, and it's a shame because it's almost become cliche. We don't even realize the sacrifice of what he did for us. But in doing so, Jesus told us how to tell other people that they're wrong. He was willing to die for them. Now, many times, and we've all seen it in churches and in families, and definitely on social media, people who are on the moral high ground put down people who are wrong. They accuse them. They point out their sins. They point out their flaws. There's a lot of name calling going around. You're homophobic. You're racist. You're bigoted. You're stupid. You're an idiot. You're wrong. And while that's happening in the political world, it also happens in our churches. It's easy for us to see the sin in other people, especially when we come from a church culture where what is right and wrong is very clear. But Jesus teaches us that we have to, well, in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, before you pull a speck out of someone else's eye, you have to take the plank out of your own eye. And what that means is we have to drop our bag of treasure. We have to take off our armor before we can rescue someone else. And what that means is we have to deeply look inside of ourselves for the same sin that we see in someone else. And once we've repented of our sins, and one of the deepest sins that we all carry is the sin of pride. And pride is, I am better than that other person. And when we've taken the sin of pride out of our eye, the armor of pride that we use to protect ourselves off of our bodies, then all we have for that person who is wrong is a self-sacrificing love. And then we're willing to get dirty, to get into the mud, to risk our own lives, to give them a chance to be saved. You see, it's not about being right. It's about taking away our pride. And when a person realizes that we are willing to die for them, that we love them for who they are, that we're trying to help them, and in humility we're pointing out something that can hurt them, they will receive our message of truth with a completely different attitude than if we're standing on our moral high ground, on the straight and narrow path, weighed down with our treasure and our armor, and we're screaming at them for being off the path. So how do you tell someone that they're wrong? Well, before you even start, you've got to love them. Because that's how Jesus loved us. If you enjoy this message, please share it with someone who can be encouraged by it. And know that no matter what's happening in the world, God's got this, and he loves you very much. God bless.